PowerPoint presentation is designed to accompany the Unit 4 insights. The focus of the presentation will be the steps in the VR process. In order to make informed decisions around the interpreting process, the interpreter must have a working knowledge of the VR process, the system that underpins the workings of the VR endeavor. Interpreters need to have a strong understanding of the prescribed nature of the VR system and the common terminology used by its personnel. First, let's review who is eligible for VR services. In order to be eligible for VR services, an individual must have a physical or mental impairment, which is a substantial barrier to employment, and require vocational rehabilitation services to prepare for, secure, retain, or regain employment, and be able to benefit from vocational rehabilitation services in terms of an employment outcome. VR cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, disability, political beliefs, sexual orientation, age, religion, or gender in the acceptance of or provision for services, employment, or treatment in its educational and other programs and activities. If an individual is receiving Social Security disability insurance or supplemental security income, VR will presume that she or he is eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. However, state VR agencies, which rely on a combination of federal and state funding to carry out their mandates, face a challenge as they attempt to meet the needs of a potentially increasing population of individuals with disabilities who seek their services. Fiscal restraints and federal and state budget cuts mean that VR agencies need to look to either savings within their program structures, or they need to move to limit the number of individuals they serve each year. The latter can be done if the state VR agency moves to an order of selection, creating a federally sanctioned waiting list in which individuals with the most severe disabilities get served first, and others are placed on the waiting list. Rehabilitation philosophy has remained relatively stable over time, although many changes have occurred in circumstances surrounding rehabilitation service delivery. A study of rehabilitation philosophy over the years reveals a long history of belief in and advocacy for the rights of people with disabilities. These rights are broadly stated in the following basic principles of rehab philosophy, drawn from the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and its amendments. These rights are that individuals with disabilities are generally presumed to be capable of engaging in gainful employment, and the provision of individualized rehabilitation services improves their ability to become gainfully employed. Individuals with disabilities must be provided the opportunities to obtain gainful employment in integrated settings. The assets of people with disabilities should be emphasized, supported, and developed. Comprehensive treatment involves the whole person because life areas are interdependent. Every person should assume as much initiative and participation as possible in the rehabilitation plan and its execution. How do these rights impact the work of interpreters? A rights-based approach to ethical decision-making has been discussed by Coakley, who states that the choices made by interpreters can uphold or deny the dignity of other people, can advocate or violate the rights of other people, and can affirm or disavow the humanity of other people. The 1998 amendments to the Rehabilitation Act provide that individuals with disabilities must be active participants in their own rehabilitation programs, the goal of which is to achieve an employment outcome. Active participation includes making meaningful and informed choices about the selection of their vocational goals and objectives, and the vocational rehabilitation services needed to achieve the goal. Informed choice is the foundation for the partnership between the participant and the counselor, in which they jointly participate in the comprehensive assessment, develop the IPE, agree upon vocational objectives, services, and service providers, and determine the roles and responsibilities of the participant and the counselor. The process of involving a participant in his/her rehabilitation program begins with an attitude of respect for persons with disabilities and recognition of their right to make appropriate choices regarding their own lives. All participants, regardless of the level of disability, education, functioning, skills, and abilities, have the right to develop and maximize their decision-making skills. Now, let's take a look at the major milestones in the VR process. Moving from one step of the process to the next requires information, actions, and/or decisions by the rehabilitation professional and the client or participant. First, the individual applies and goes through an evaluation process. Based on the evaluation, eligibility is determined. If eligible, then a planning process occurs to plan what services and actions need to be taken to help the individual obtain employment. The individual will receive the services and may obtain employment. The process does not end there, however, since VR clients also often receive post-employment services. While this presentation focuses on the process, an upcoming presentation will focus on the various services the client may receive at each step in the process and the interpreter's role in those services. Let's first look at the application process. Any person with a disability may apply for VR services by contacting a VR office and making an appointment. VR staff will arrange for the individual to make an application and meet with the vocational rehabilitation counselor so that eligibility can be determined. The application process is more efficient if the applicant brings current medical, psychological, educational records, and other information about their disability to the appointment. During the first interview, the counselor explains the rehabilitation process and gathers information about the applicant. An interesting fact is that in some states, an individual may also register to vote or change their voter registration when applying for VR services. VR must evaluate the individual's disability to find out if they are eligible. If additional tests are needed, VR will pay for the tests required to determine eligibility. The purposes of the evaluation are to gather diagnostic information and explore the applicant's background, abilities, and disability-related barriers to employment and rehabilitation needs. Generally, VR has 60 days from the time of application to determine whether or not an applicant is eligible for services. If the applicant is eligible, she or he is assigned to a priority group based on the significance of the disability. When services are restricted during an order of selection, clients in priority groups whose disabilities are less significant barriers to employment may have to wait until funds are available to pay for their services. Even when an applicant is not eligible or is placed on a waiting list, VR will provide vocational rehabilitation information and referral assistance to help the person obtain services from other sources. Once eligibility is determined, the applicant becomes a client of VR and a plan for employment will be developed. If an individual is eligible, the VR counselor provides information about choices for developing an individualized plan for employment, or IPE. This plan of VR services will help the individual get or keep suitable employment in an appropriate career. The IPE is based on the client's strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice, and must be approved by VR according to Rehabilitation Act requirements. A client may choose to write the plan independently or with assistance from VR or someone else who is willing to help. The plan must be in writing and must be completed within 90 days of the determination of eligibility, unless the client and VR counselor agree to an extension. As a part of the planning process, the client will have the opportunity, with the help of the VR counselor, to choose an appropriate employment goal, the VR services to be provided, the businesses or companies that will provide the services, and the methods for providing those services. Many different services are available to help VR clients meet their employment goals. Throughout the process, evaluation, counseling, and career planning guidance is provided. And the IPE may include the need for a client to attend different types of training to prepare for employment. A subsequent PowerPoint provides more insight into these various services. A VR counselor will assist the client in finding a job. VR also has employment specialists who work with counselors and potential employers to match qualified clients with suitable employment. Counselors should be informed when a client starts working at a new job so that they can assist with any problems. Typically, after a client has been successfully working for 90 days, their case will be closed. If a client's situation changes, perhaps they lose or may have trouble keeping a job, they may go back to VR for more help after the case is closed. They may be eligible for post-employment services to help keep their job, get their job back, move ahead on the job, or move to a better job. If a client needs a lot of assistance, she or he may be asked to reapply. Individuals may exit or leave the program at any time. The rehabilitation professional's job is to navigate individuals through this process in an efficient and effective manner with the participants' interests at the forefront. This slide provides a quick review of information that is required and the activities and services that might occur in the various steps of the VR process. An important part of the VR lingo terminology is the use of reference codes that relate to specific aspects of the VR process and services provided. A comprehensive list of these codes can be found at the listed website. You are encouraged to review these codes and to bookmark the website for later reference, as these codes will be used frequently when interpreting within the VR setting, particularly when working with VR professionals in staff meetings, working with VR counselors and clients, and during other administrative processes.